So it's lesson 9, part 2. We're still just waiting for our AWS server to reboot, but there's still some things that we can do. So we've outlined our process. We're going to need to build a table in MySQL. We're going to need a way to register users, format, make sure they're giving us a properly formatted email address and password. We're going to want to encrypt the password. We're actually not going to quite encrypt it. We're going to do a version of that, which we'll talk about in a minute. We want to then register users in the database. We need to build a login page and then add some logic into our application that checks, is the user logged in, yes or no? And we're going to show them and allow them to do different things depending on whether they're authenticated or whether they are anonymous. So to give you a visual, my super awesome graphic design skills. What does this look like? Just upload this file. D2L doesn't import them when I copy my courses from one term to the other. So let's say a user wants to add, they try to go to our item details page. So they request the URL, the web server serves the page back, and then on this page, we're going to ask this question. We're going to have this decision. Is the user authenticated, yes or no? If they are authenticated, we'll want to show the item details page so the user could either add a new item to the grocery list or edit an existing item. If the user's not authenticated, we want to redirect them back to the login page, ask them to enter their credentials, and then when they submit the form, we've got to check, does that credential set exist in the database, yes or no? If it doesn't, we're going to tell the user their login is invalid, and we're going to kick them back once again, giving them another chance to try to log in. They're going to try again to log in. This time, we'll evaluate that same decision. And here's an important point. Before we can leave and take them to the page they've asked for, we're going to have to store their identity somehow. And we've got a couple of options. We're going to use the session object for this, but how else could we store their identity besides using a session? Most websites we use either sessions or they use another way to store things, to store information. Nope, not in the database. Good guess, Ivan. You could store user information in a session, or what would be the other option? Thank you, Chris. We could store it in sessions or in cookies. So we need to have a little discussion about sessions and cookies. And some websites will let us use both. So you're going to need to do a little bit of search engine sleuthing here. So what are the differences? What is a session? What's a cookie? How are they different? We can use either one for storing a user login. What's different about them? So do a little searching online. Tell me what you use the chat or use your mic. What do you find out? Okay, so that's an important point, Ivan. So okay, so stored on the client machine. Yep. Thank you, Xavier. Nice to hear from a few other people as well. Stored on web server. Okay, so that's a really important distinction. What else can we say about sessions or cookies? That's the most important difference, and I can guarantee you there is a quiz question next week about this. So cookies are client-side, sessions are server-side. Absolutely true. Okay. Ivan, I completely agree. Can you explain why? There's a few reasons why sessions would be safer, more secure. How come? Okay, that's one reason. Thanks, Mason. Yep. Aha, Ivan, right. They cannot be accessed by the user. How do you access your cookies? Where would you go if you wanted to access the cookies? Yeah, in your browser settings. So what could a user do with their cookies in the browser settings? You can also even find them in your file system. They can be edited, or as Megan said, yeah, they can be cleared. So you can modify them because cookies are just text files. Now, well-made cookies will be encrypted, but you can still see them or delete them. The sessions, they live on the web server, so you have no access to modify those. Okay. What about timeouts? What's usual for sessions and cookies? Let's see if I can still get into this site. Got an example. See if my login still works. Okay. Ivan, yeah, they actually by default. Can anybody find out what's the default timeout for a session in PHP? And Brandon, that's a good point as well, right? So ends when user closes browser. Jacob, you're close. Anybody find the answer? So Chris, you found 24 minutes for PHP? Yeah, typically for most web servers, if you don't specify, your session times out after 20 or 30 minutes. So if you log into a site and they're using a session to keep track of you, if you're inactive, you don't remake a refresh or navigate or do any interaction with the server at all, typically it's going to time out within 20 to 30 minutes. What's normal default, or what's normal? How long do cookies typically last? Authentication cookies. There's not necessarily a default timeout. What about what's kind of, see what you can find out about cookie expiry. if you have a cookie on your machine that stores your login, yeah, typically, Preston, good guess. It depends. Usually when you create a cookie, you have to set an expiry. And typically, Xavier, that's the good guess. So login cookies are often set with a 365-day expiry. Now, Preston, you're right. They could be longer. And Ivan, yeah, could they be years? They could be. So typically when you create, you do set an expiry, but often it's 365 days. So which is going to be safer? A site that logs you out automatically after 20, 30 minutes, or a site that keeps you logged in for a year or longer? Mason, I can't remember. I'd have to look that up. Yeah, Chris, that's right. So the sessions are going to be more secure. The default timeout is short. The user can't edit or delete them. They can't be hacked because they're on the server. So we want to use sessions. Now, some websites give you a choice. How do you know when you log into a website, you can often tell when they use both sessions and cookies? How can you tell as a user? I don't know if Facebook still has it. They certainly used to on their login. Just go here. Good guess. Oh, they don't have it anymore. There's an option you sometimes see on the login screen. Remember, think about that cookies can keep you logged in. How does that happen? Maybe I'll go here. Let's see. The remember me option. You got it, Chris. So when you have a remember me option, if you sign in without checking it, it's probably using a session. So you're only going to be logged in so long as you're still active in the site and don't close your browser. When you choose remember me, it's setting a cookie so that you don't have to log in every time, right? It's more convenient, but it's also less secure because it means if anybody gets on your device, the cookie has you automatically logged into the site, which is less secure. So I never choose the remember me option. Yeah, I know it's easier to not have to enter your credentials again, but it's much less secure to use cookies for logging in for this reason. Now there's one warning with sessions, which is the timeout. By default, like I said, only to 20 or 30 minutes. So here's a website I built many years ago. A student helped me build it. And we use sessions for this, but our customers, they asked us to actually put in a timeout, a session timeout, because here's what happened. They would go to add new data here. Well, actually, just search for one. And what we didn't realize, oh wow, is this site this old? Holy moly. Built this back in 2009. What we didn't realize was these forms were huge. And when we first built this site, users would fill out all this information, but we didn't realize it would take them more than 20 minutes to fill it out. So the users would be filling out all this stuff. They'd literally be in this page for hours. They'd hit save at the bottom and their session would time out and they'd lose all the data and they'd get kicked out of the site. So we put this little session timer countdown, and we also put save buttons in each section. So that, and we'd ask them to save as they went so their session wouldn't time out, they wouldn't lose all their data. So we're going to use sessions instead of cookies for these reasons. Safer, can't be accessed by the user. So I'll save those notes and you can refer to them because there are some quiz questions in this week's lesson about sessions and cookies. So that brings me back to my, are we up yet? Nope. So that brings me back here. Long-winded discussion about sessions and cookies, but it's important to understand what they both are and what the differences are. Why do we have to store the user ID in the session object? So when someone gives us a username and password, we check the users table and we say, yep, we have this person. Why can't we just let them leave and go get the page they want? Why do we need to store their ID either in a session or in a cookie? As you can see in my lovely diagram. What's the point? Why can't we just check the database, say, yes, we found this person, and let them go wherever they want? Why do we have to get the session involved? Good. That's a good guess, Megan. Doesn't really have to do with denial of service attacks, but an excellent guess. Has to do with the nature of the HTTP protocol. What happens to variables and data as you navigate through a website and you go from one page to another in a site? So we're on the login page, we've checked the database, we know who someone is, and then they leave and go to a new page. What happens to that information about the user? That's right, Chris, they aren't kept unless they're passed. So here's the key. HTTP, and I'm going to put this in the chat, is a stateless protocol. So that means any values, any variables, they get destroyed on every new HTTP request. And whenever you click on a link or you go to a new page, you're making a new request. So any information that we had stored in memory, it's gone as soon as a new request is made, even if we click refresh on the same page. So for example, keeping track of like how many items are in your shopping cart. Yes, same thing with HTTPS, Chris. They're stateless. So every request, it's like a blank slate. So if we want data to persist as users make new requests and move through our site, we need some sort of permanent storage container. So in our case, we're going to use the session or a cookie. So once we've identified who somebody is, before we let them leave and go to a new page, we've got to store who they are. Otherwise, as soon as they leave that page, we've lost them. Their identity gets wiped out. Okay, so that's why we're going to have to use a session or a cookie. So that gives us that permanent storage as the user travels around, makes different requests, goes to different pages. Okay, our site is still not up. So, okay, we can't build our users table yet because we can't get into our database. I do. Yep. I am connected. Is anybody able to connect to AWS? You can? All right, let me disconnect. I certainly appreciate the debugging help because I don't know what's going on. Okay, I'm glad you guys can. It's okay, there's still a few things we can do. We may not get everything done today I wanted to, because if I can't connect, Mind you, I've got a workaround. Okay, so some can and some can't. Thank you, Adam, for weighing in. So we will need to create the users table in the database, but I've given you, just to save time, I've actually given you register and login pages. These are just plain old forms. So by now I think everyone knows how to build HTML forms. So in the lesson 9 folder, let's download the register and login files. So I'm just going to download my register file and save it. So I'm going to save it into my lamp food folder. So go to htdocs, lamp food. I'm going to save it here. And I'm going to download the login file. I didn't think I had these pages already. So I'm going to download both of them. So now when I click my register, when I go to my header, and we're going to enable these register and login links. Right now, when we click them, they don't go anywhere. So I'll close up all my files here. It's got a lot of stuff going on. I realize we have a whole bunch of test pages. I'll move those into a subfolder in a minute as well. I know people said we've got a lot of files. It's getting overwhelming. It is a good point, so I'm going to clean this up in a minute. Let's open up the header. And in my nav bar, on line 29 and 32, I have links that say register and log in, but they don't go anywhere right now. The href is just a pound symbol. So I'm going to change them to load the register and login pages. I'm also just going to take out the active tag, the active class, on my grocery list link. So that all the links look the same. So my 3 links go to items, register, login. So when I click on register, we get this. When I click on login, we get a login form. We'll make a couple of other little changes to this. So again, I've downloaded register and login and just updated the links to activate the register and login links in our header. Make a couple little changes. So I'm going to open up register and login. So we've given it a page title and included the header. This is pretty much a standard form. So we talked earlier about validating the email. So I've got type equals email here. And then a password. And I'll style my button as well. Make it BTN primary. So instead of my button being gray with black, it'll be blue with white. No, Ivan, it's on D2L. The register and login pages are available for download in the lesson 9 folder. They're right here. Oh yeah, you can just overwrite it. We're not going to use the old one. So that's fine, Adam. Yeah, you can overwrite it. And on my register page, so we talked about password validation. So I've used a regular expression in the pattern. So when we're registering, this is going to validate that our password has at least one digit, one lowercase, one uppercase character, and is a minimum of 8 characters. And I'll also just add styling to the button again. BTN register. Whoops, BTN primary. I also want to add our forms are all crammed together. I'm going to add a little bit of padding. So there's some little spacing between each field set. So we can go to our own style sheet and do this. I'm going to open up my CSS folder and my custom styles. And we'll add to the field set tag. We'll maybe just add some padding of 10 pixels. We'll see how that looks. So this should give us a little space so the input boxes aren't right next to each other. That didn't work very well, did it? Well, my CSS skills seem to be getting worse by the day. I'm not sure why our padding isn't working. Okay, do I have access to the database yet? You don't think we linked the style sheet? I thought we did link it in the header. Yep, here's our CSS. So the CSS is in the header, and the header is linked in the page, so it should be there. I'll have to figure out why. Okay, so I still have no database access. And I could use my local database for today. I think they did, Megan, because, for example, we changed the header color, so that seemed to work. Yeah, I still can't log in to the database. Is there anybody else, if you could let me know, anybody besides Adam who cannot log in, who cannot connect to your database? Because I can always change mine to work locally, but if most people don't have database access, I'll maybe have to make a little bit of adjustment to our plan here. Thanks, Ivan. So let me know if you can access your AWS database. I know some of you can, some of you can't. Ivan, we do have that. Thank you. Okay, Bree, you can. That's good. Yeah, here's our link to our style sheet. It is in the header. But thank you. You're right. We absolutely need that. Is there anybody else who can't get into their database? You're able to now? Okay, great. All right, well, what I can do is I can use my local database for this. I guess it just doesn't like me today, but that's okay. So we now want to create a table in the database for our users. So I'll just use my local database. And I'll go to my database file. And instead of AWS, I will just connect locally. So I'll comment out my AWS connection. And I'll put in my local connection. This will work. Okay. So in here, let's see, I will just create a database, Rich 100. And now I've given you a script on D2L to build the users table. So if you open this user table item, pretty simple script. I can put it in the chat as well. I'll run my use command. Then I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to create a users table with 3 columns. A user ID, which will be assigned automatically by the database, a username, and a password. And we're going to talk about the password in just a second. So copy this script, run it in your database to build your users table. Now you may be saying, wow, 128 characters, that's a pretty long password. Is anybody really going to enter 128 characters for the password? The answer is no. So why did I pick 128? Okay. Encrypted encryption. Sort of yes. So yes, we want the passwords. We don't want the passwords stored in plain text. Not very secure. We want them in an unreadable form. We do not, however, want to encrypt them. Hint, quiz question coming up on this. We want to do something else that's like encryption, but it's not encryption. How come we don't want to encrypt the passwords? We're going to do something like encryption, but it's not encryption. Yep, guessing is good. Go ahead and guess, Shazil. We're going to use a different process. Thank you, Jacob. And Chris, excellent. We are going to use hashing instead of encryption. How come? This is a great interview question for a junior developer. What's the difference between hashing and encryption? I'll give you a hint. What happens on modern websites if you forget your password? How do you regain access to a website if you can't remember the password? Okay, yes, Chris, they do send an email. And then what happens? Right, Owen, thank you. You have to reset it. Ivan, you've hit it on the head. Any value that you can encrypt, you can decrypt. So encryption is a two-way process from plain text to unreadable text, but you can also, anything you can encrypt, you can convert back from the unreadable text back into the original plain text. Hashing is one way only. There's no unhashing algorithm. Okay. So Owen said you have to reset your password because passwords are in most modern websites, they are hashed. So there's no way to show you your original plain text version of the password. So hashing is more secure, and it's why websites no longer will, answer a security question and show you the original password because they can't. There's no way to convert it back into its plain text version. So we don't want to encrypt the password, we want to hash it. And if we look at the PHP documentation for hashing passwords, there's a method called hash, which they update the algorithm for every so often. So this is what a hashed value would look like typically. And the documentation tells us that our best practice, it tells us somewhere in here, is to account for 128 characters. Yeah, Mason, nothing is ever foolproof, but they do update the algorithms fairly regularly. But absolutely, it's not that it cannot possibly be done, but with encryption, you just call a decrypt method with the same encryption key and bang, it's done. So hashing, Chris, is converting plain text using one of these algorithms to generate a string that looks something like this. But hashing, you can't unhash. There's no way to convert this value back into the original value. Whereas with encryption, you can decrypt a value and it will convert it back into plain text. Hashing only goes one way, from plain text to something like this. So we want to hash passwords. We don't want to encrypt them. So now that we've got our register page, it's posting to a page called Save Registration. I think we already have a page with this name. We do. Whereas before, yeah, we just did this when we were learning how forms worked. So we can actually work with our Save Registration page that we have to hash the password and save a new user to the database. So you can open up the Save Registration page. It's on GitHub in its current form if you don't have it. So we're going to take in the username and the password, as well as the password confirmation. Because on our register form, right, we've got three inputs: username, password, and confirm. So we already had line 10. We're going to add lines 11 and 12. We want to validate the inputs. So if our username is empty, and I probably also want to use my OK flag, just like we've done before. We'll default it to true. But if we have any validation errors, we're going to toggle it to false. We'll want to make sure the password isn't empty. And then we also want to make sure that the password and the confirmation password, that those two values are equal, that the user hasn't given us two separate passwords. So if our password is empty, we'll do the same thing. Password is required. Again, we'll toggle OK from true to false. And then we need one more check where we're comparing password and confirm for equality. So there's our validation that username is entered, password is entered, and password and confirm. Yep. Sure. There's the paste bin link if you need it. I'll delete this stuff. So we'll save if valid. So if okay, we will connect, set up SQL, insert, hash the password, save to DB. Disconnect and show a confirmation. So here are the steps, almost all of which you could do without my help. By this point, hashing the password is really the only new thing, and it's pretty simple. To connect, we can just now include our database file. We no longer need to write the whole connection line. We want to insert into users, into the username and password fields. And we'll use two parameters, username and password. We'll create our command as usual. We'll hash the password and we'll fill our two parameters, username and password. So PHP has a neat little method, password hash. And it takes two parameters. What string are we hashing? And the second parameter is which hashing algorithm are we going to use? So we saw in the documentation there were different algorithms we could use The current standard is to use, I shouldn't have closed the page, I'll just go back to it. Password hash. So we'll just look at the documentation, which you can find. Here's the link in the chat. So what's the password value we're hashing? What algorithm creates a strong one-way hashing algorithm and uses password default? So an example here is with this enumerator, password default. And it'll give us something like this. So before we put the password into our parameter, we're going to hash it. So then we're going to fill our username parameter with our username variable. That's 100 characters. And then we're going to fill the password parameter with the password variable, except it's going to be 128 characters. Chris, that's a good question. It's not, it wouldn't happen immediately when PHP updates their standard because it's whatever version of PHP and algorithm is installed on the web server we're using. So that automatically doesn't get updated. We would have to update the version of PHP for that to happen. If it's off topic, Ivan, then maybe I could ask you to maybe just wait, as now may not be the appropriate time. I maybe ask you to hold on to that for the end of class if it's off topic, please. So then to save, we'll execute our query. And disconnect. It's almost time for a break. We're just going to finish this page. I will post the code to GitHub in a minute. So everything is the same as a normal insert. This line is the only thing new. And I think I've been saying through the semester, web programming is actually fairly repetitive. And you can see we're doing the same things. Connect to the database, create an SQL statement with parameters, prepare it, fill the parameters, call, execute, disconnect. Nothing new here other than we're hashing the one value. And then for our confirmation, we can just echo maybe an H1. It says registration saved. So then we're going to prompt the user to log in. It limits the output, Ivan. So we don't want a value any longer than that column in the database can accept. So if the user enters 200 characters, we're only going to take the first 128 characters. Okay, I'm just going to try this out, and then I'll push my code and we will take a break. So I'm going to go back to my register page. I'm going to recommend we all create the same account, because this way no one will have to remember their password. So here's the credential I'm going to use. I'm going to use user@gc.ca, and my password will be test1234. So if we try to sign up with that, then next week when you go, I don't remember my password for the site, we'll just say, well, it's user@gc.ca, test1234. Okay, I have a problem in my database connection string, which I'll go fix. Oh, my username is root. Get confused between my different database systems. Resubmit. Good, registration saved. We should probably add our header to this page. Now I can go to log in. And now if I look at my users table and see what's in here, right? Here's my username and here is my password that's been hashed. If I create a second user account with this exact same, with the same password, it's going to generate a unique value. That's part of what that password hash does. So let me go back, register, and I'll say abc@gc.ca. I'm going to put in the same password, test1234. Register. When I run the query again, notice the hash value is different every time. So the hashing algorithm ensures uniqueness. So even though I entered the same password 2 times, the actual database value once it's hashed is different for security. Okay, it's 3:54. Nope. Now what we should do is we should actually add a check, Megan. That is a good point. Right now, it will allow me to do it. We should add some logic here that before we insert, we should be checking the username doesn't exist. So we'll do that when we come back. So yes, right now it would be a problem. Thank you for pointing that out. So we should actually run a query first to check. Okay, I'm going to push this up to GitHub and stop the recording. Give my voice a break for 10 minutes. And yes, we will deal with Megan's suggestion and Chris's question when we come back. Sound like a game show host. Okay, see you guys in 10 minutes.